In 1989, the Finn brothers' first proper collaborative writing effort was going so well that Neil found himself in a difficult situation. He was enjoying working on the new material with his brother, but he'd already begun putting together the third Crowded House album.
Well, we had a dilemma because it was a dilemma. I was halfway through making the third Crowded House record. We'd done some sessions in LA, and then I came back and did this with Tim. Well, they were intersecting anyway at some point. And there was all this great energy coming from this session that Tim and I had, this songwriting session, and yet that album was kind of set off into the future and didn't know when we'd get around to it. And it was actually playing havoc with me because I was trying to finish a Crowded House record and thinking, well, here's these great songs, I'd rather be doing these. And we were short of a few songs for that record anyway. So, it just seemed blindingly obvious one day to us that one really good solution would be for Tim to join Crowded House and us to pool the resources and make one amazing record out of it all. And what was blindingly obvious to us was probably not immediately obvious to Nick and Paul because it was all news, and they probably feared a Finn power block, some kind of... But, they saw that a couple of days in studio with the music going really well, they saw the sense in it as well, so...
I think it was strange for them too, because we'd cut these early tracks like Weather With You and There Goes God and one or two others with different drummer, a friend of ours, Ricky Fattar, and Neil playing bass, and so it was really odd in a way to fit that back into a Crowded House record, but somehow we made it work. And the last thing I wanted to do was to change. I mean, I'd seen them a lot, seen Crowded House a lot, and always loved them. One great tune after another, and just so much good humour and showmanship, and they were always great shows. So the last thing I wanted to do was to really mess with that, but also I didn't want to have to compromise too much who I was. So it was hard. It was a hard fit in some ways, but from the song point of view and the music, it was perfect and just seemed really great. But from changing a band's dynamic, it was odd.
Woodface was released in 1991 with over half the tracks on the album, including It's Only Natural, 4 Seasons in One Day and Chocolate Cake, co-written by Neil and Tim. Following the release of the record, Crowded House, now officially a 4-piece, set out on tour, and while his impact on the songwriting had been invaluable, it soon became clear that Tim's role in the band had been fulfilled, and halfway through the tour he made the decision to leave.
It came to a natural end one night. I think we all knew, that it just wasn't really working on stage. It was hard for me to just keep back and be a keyboard player, even though I had my moments still of coming forward, but it was just an odd thing where I'd spent 12 years with Split Enz being the front man, and I didn't even know how to be just a guy in a band, and I was too tall anyway. Crowded House, you had to be a certain height, Neil's not so short, but Nick and Paul are both little guys, and so it always looked and felt a bit weird. But we made a great record and had some brilliant times.
Shortly after Tim left Crowded House, Woodface enjoyed breakthrough success in the UK, where it achieved platinum status and led to headlining performances at Wembley Arena. In 1993, Neil and Tim were awarded OBEs from the Queen of England for their contributions to the arts. That same year, Crowded House began recording their 4th album, adding American guitarist Mark Hart. Together Alone entered the UK charts at number 4 and a European tour followed. They were beginning a US tour when drummer Paul Hester decided to leave the band. A session drummer was hired to finish off the tour, and eventually the band returned to Australia. Once again, things grew quiet for Crowded House, and in 1994, Neil and Tim decided it was time to have another go at writing a Finn Brothers record.
Well, we finally sort of cleared the decks and decided to do a Finn Brothers record. We wanted to play everything ourselves. We wanted to work with Chad Blake, our friend and sort of collaborator. He used to engineer with Mitchell's stuff, and then he went on to become a producer himself. So these kind of decisions were easy to make. I was dying to play the drums a bit in the studio, and Neil had a T-chest bass, and we'd been up to the Cook Islands, so we had a kind of bit of summer Langer kind of a sort of feeling, a bit of, swing and sway to our sort of imaginations, and we got in there and did it. And it's actually, to this day, a lot of musicians will say it's their favourite record of ours. It's got a certain lo-fi-ness that I think stands up really well over time. It was a delight to make.
It was fun, it was quick.
Finn was released in 1995 and the brothers then toured the album and shot 3 videos. And during the following year, Crowded House officially disbanded, and the same month a best of collection was released, entering the New Zealand, Australian and UK charts at number 1. A few last shows followed, and on Sunday the 24th of November 1996, Crowded House played their official farewell show at the Sydney Opera House to 100,000 fans. 2 years later, a new world of musical opportunities were opened up to Neil as he released his debut solo album, Try Whistling This.
A band is a more permanent collaboration, and you are quite happy to limit your palette, as it were, because of the band that you've got, and enjoy each other's company. And there's a great comfort in that. You're in with strangers initially with a solo record, but I think in essence, the best work that we've probably both done solo has been because we've had the similar feeling in the room when the songs have gone down to what a band is, and ultimately you just want a player to give themselves completely to the song, put their personality on it as best as they can, even with direction obviously, but the moments when it feels least exciting is when people are looking at you too much for what do you want me to play.
In 1999, Neil continued his solo work with Encore, and then came 1-0 in 2001. In 2002, Neil put together a live collaboration album called Seven Worlds Collide, which featured an all-star lineup including ex-Smiths guitarist Johnny Marr, Radiohead's Ed O'Brien and Phil Selway, and Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder. Tim also appeared on the album, and before long, the pair teamed up yet again to work on the long-awaited second Finn Brothers record.
This one has been in gestation for a long time because we've been looking at each other and saying we've got to do that album sometime, probably 3 or 4 years now, and eventually about 2.5 years ago. Well, the one thing we were fixated on, I suppose, was making sure that it didn't compete with anything else. It was just given its own dedicated time, because we were aware that the last Finn record, as great as it was squashed and sandwiched in between a whole lot of other stuff, and Woodface became something different to what it was originally intended. So we thought we've got to do one that's just start from beginning to end, fully committed Finn Brothers thing. So we started writing in earnest, and we actually didn't rush it. We gave it its due, and we planned and plotted for the strategy for making the album, and we came at it a couple of times to, get it right, and whatever it took.
With the release of the second Finn Brothers album, Everyone Is Here in 2004, once again the musical connection between the brothers is undeniable.
Can't never take for granted the fact that there's somebody else on the planet that's genetically very similar in a lot of ways to the way that we sing together, the way we phrase when we play guitar, just the little things that you can't get from anybody but a sibling. And so we'd be fools not to throw ourselves into that at times. In a way, it's there.
Made of glass, broken mirror view. Let your eyes relax. Rest on the glass, watch it all come to pass. Once again, we'll breathe in with you. It's part of me, part of you. Voice won't sing, and my tears won't cry. Your disciple waits for any good advice. Our place in time, it's not set in stone, and we'll still be here when the cows come home. Mist on the glass. inside my head. And I'm still in a dream that won't end. Once again, we're breathing the view. It's part of me, part of you. Mist on the glass, watch it all come to pass. Once again, we're breathing the view. It's part of me, part of you. And it has to be clear. It has to be clear inside my head.
In the history of the charts in New Zealand, Split Enz are the country's most successful band on the albums chart, and Neil Finn has had more number ones than any other local artist. Meanwhile, Crowded House are one of the country's most internationally recognised bands. The Finn brothers have become national treasures, and while they've both enjoyed successful solo careers, there's no denying that something enchanting happens when their passion for music and songwriting is combined.
There's a creative spark, you know, that, and there's an interest there, there's a fascination there. I mean, when Neil and I get into a room and start writing, it feels as exciting to me as it used to when I would write with Phil, or, you know, it's a magical thing, and if it doesn't work, which sometimes it doesn't, then there's a certain amount of kind of despair and dejection, but the excitement is always going to pull you on. And that's why we do what we do together. You know, it's not like there's any plan or favours going on, or, you know, it's the thing of being in a room with a guitar and a piano. It's what it always was.
Won't give